Okay. So the special rule, it's a non-recognition rule. So remember we talked about non-recognition rules back in Module 2? This is a non-recognition, and we talked about it in Section 351, all this stuff. This is a non-recognition rule. The idea is that if you have a shareholder who has 80% or more, they're viewed as a parent. So Orange in this situation is considered a parent, and Ugly Fruit Corporation that's liquidating is considered a subsidiary. So is there complete liquidation? In this class, if there's a liquidation, it'll be complete liquidation. Does a parent-subsidiary relationship exist? Yes. Again, 80% or more owned by a corporation. Complete liquidation plan adopted? Assume in this class, yes. So that means basically the special rule is going to apply. Now, under the general rule, we have two sets of checklists. We have the shareholders, their consequences, and we have the corporation, their consequences. For purposes of the special rule, we have three checklists. We have one for the parent, one for the minority shareholder, and then one for the subsidiary. So the parent here is Orange Corp. The minority is Grapefruit Corp. And then the subsidiary is, of course, Ugly Fruit Corp. So this is how it works. For the parent corporation, Orange, no gain or loss recognized. The adjusted basis that Orange takes in the property is going to equal transfer basis. You roll over the basis, and you also get the tack on holding period. And then all tax attributes roll over, which I'm not going to test you on that. Just know that all tax attributes, which are like EMP, net operating losses, they roll over from the subsidiary to the parent. What about the minority shareholder? This one's easy. It's just like the general rule for shareholders. They have to calculate the gain or loss they would have to recognize as normal. So that leaves us with the consequences of the subsidiary. So this is what's going on. Orange, Grapefruit, Ugly Fruit Corp. Basically what the rules are doing is they're saying we're going to break up the transaction into this and this. No gain or loss here. Yes gain or loss here. However, there's a special rule that says that the subsidiary can never recognize a loss. So right here is where it says it. This is the anti-abuse rule. Because the idea is that you would cherry pick. You give all your gain property to your parent corporation because no gain or loss recognized, and you give the loss property to the non-parent minority shareholder. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically ignore the transaction between Orange and Ugly Fruit. We're only going to focus on the transaction between Ugly Fruit and Grapefruit. We're going to record the gain or loss on that transaction, but if it's a loss, we can't take it. That's all we have to do. Not that bad. So let's go to the problem and let's analyze. All right, so problem 1, Pineapple Express. Let's go through this one. Let's pull this out. So Pineapple Express C Corporation was formed many years ago to provide private charter flights to Hawaii. In this exam, it doesn't matter what the corporation does. Just focus that it's a corporation. Coconut owns 600 out of 1,000 shares outstanding. That's important. Coconut's an individual. Also important. Now, Coconut acquires 400 of the 600 shares 20 years ago for $50,000. And the remaining 200 of the 600 shares this year for $1.9 million. The corporation decides to liquidate. The corporation sells its assets, which has an adjusted basis of $1 million, for $10 million cash. Consider the consequences to the corporation and to Coconut, one of the shareholders. Okay, so we got A and B. Remember, so we're going to do A first. remember that on this exam, the first thing that you always want to do is determine which module applies. Is it module 6 formation? Module 7, right? You can have dividend received deductions, organizational expenditures, those types of issues. Module 8, distribution or redemption. And module 9, liquidation. Now notice in this problem, we're told that the corporation distributes money to Coconut. But remember I told you that you're going to have liquidating distributions and non-liquidating distributions. Non-liquidating distributions are module 8. Liquidating distributions are module 9. The way you know, if you see anywhere in the problem that the corporation is going to liquidate, we have it here, here, it's module 9. So that's the key language. If you see liquidation anywhere, my exam, CPA exam, that is a liquidation issue. Not the same as module 8. Not the same as module 8. So because we have a liquidation question, we've just answered the first question, right? We're under the liquidation module 8 rules. So the next question, right? So step 1, determine which module applies. Okay? So on the exam, again, you're going to have fact patterns. You want to determine is this module 6, 7, 8, or 9. So we know, hey, it's liquidation. We know because the problem tells us liquidation. Step 2, now that we know liquidation, is it the general rule or the special rule? So the special rule only applies if you have a corporate shareholder that owns 80% or more of all the stock of the corporation. We only know about Coconut. Coconut is an individual, right? So that means that we know at least one shareholder is not a corporation. We don't know about all the shareholders. But you have to have a corporation shareholder that owns 80% or more. So we have Coconut, an individual. Coconut owns 600 out of 1,000 shares. That's 60%. So that means all the other owners own 40%. So that means it's not possible that a corporation owns 80% or more. Does everyone see that? Just based on process of elimination. And they do stuff like that on the CPA exam. Process of elimination like that. So that means that we're under the general rule. General rule applies. Okay? We went through the checklist already, last class, on the general rule. General rule is pretty straightforward. All you're going to do is we're going to determine the consequences of the corporation and the consequences to the shareholder. Okay, let's start with the corporation. So all we're doing is the corporation is liquidating. It's getting rid of assets, liabilities, all these different items, and winding up its operations. No longer going to be there. All the books are closed. We've got property transactions. You've got property that's going out of the corporation. Property is being distributed to the owners. So for the corporation, it's going to be the greater of, remember we talked about this last class, the fair market value or liability relief. Whichever of the two is greater. Well, guess what? In this problem, we have zero liability relief, so it's of course going to be the fair market value is the greater. So the property being distributed out by the corporation is at $10 million cash. So amount realized is $10 million. Adjusted basis. The adjusted basis of the property, not the stock to the shareholder, that's for the shareholder side, is $1 million. That means the corporation has a $9 million gain. The character of that gain is whatever the assets are. So if the assets are 1231 assets, it's a 1231 gain. I'm not going to test you on what the character of this gain or loss is for the corporation, but that's how you determine it. You might have it on a CPA exam. Of course, you'd have it in practice if you were in tax practice. Okay, so that's all you do for the corporation. That's easy, right? The key is just which basis do you use? Do you use the stock basis the shareholder has, or the basis of the property? Use the property basis. Easy. But that's usually where students get confused. I'm just trying to tell you where students get confused. Yeah.
That says greater of.
Yeah, you pick the greater of.
Fair market value or liability.
Yeah, liability relief.
Okay.
That's what the amount realized is going to be. So we'll see an example later where the liability relief is going to be greater, and we use that.
What's the zero charge problem?
There's no liabilities here
Okay.
in this problem.
Okay.
So it's going to be, of course, if you have no liabilities, it's going to be fair market value.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we do the consequences of the shareholder. So we take amount realized minus adjusted basis, and we're applying the concepts we've been applying all semester. Right? Think back to Module 1, Module 2, Module 3. Amount realized is what you're getting. Actual cash plus constructive cash, right? Plus the fair market value non-cash property minus selling expenses. So what is the shareholder getting here? The shareholder is getting $6 million of cash. So amount realized, $6 million cash. That's all the shareholder is getting. Minus the adjusted basis, and this is the key again. This is going to be the stock basis. The basis in the stock, which here we're told Coconut acquired the stock, all the 600 shares, 2 different times, $50,000 and $1.9 million. This is $1.95 million. So what's 6 million minus 1.95 million? $4,050,000. Now, shareholder has stock. Stock is a capital asset in this class, right? So it's going to be capital gain. Here's the issue, though. We've got long-term and short-term capital gain. You ask why? Because some of the stock was acquired 20 years ago. Some was acquired this year. This year, of course, is a year or less. So that means we have to break up that $4,050,000 capital gain as long-term and short-term. How are we going to do that? We're going to break up the amount realized. So we're going to recalculate the gain. So yes, what we've just done is correct. It should be a $4,050,000 capital gain. But the question is, how much of the $4,050,000 is long-term? How much is short-term? The way we do it is we break up the $6 million amount realized. We do it based on the number of shares. So the long-term portion, we take the long-term number of shares, which is 400, over the total shares, which is 600. That's going to equal 4 million. The short-term portion, we take 6 million times the short-term shares, 200 shares, over total number of shares, equals 2 million. So then what we're going to do is we're going to do again long-term, short-term, amount realized minus adjusted basis. So the amount realized for long-term is going to be 4 million. What was the adjusted basis of the long-term shares? 50,000. Thank you, Tim. That's $3,950,000. Short term is going to be the 2 million amount realized minus the adjusted basis of the shares, which is 1.9 million. $100,000. So this is a $3,950,000 long-term capital gain, $100,000 short-term capital gain. And if you add those together, you get $4,050,000, and guess what? You're done with A. So we break up the amount realized based on the number of shares. That's the rule. Any questions on that? Okay. Now we're going to do B, which will be real quick. In B, Same exact question, but now the now the shareholder only gets $300,000 cash. So all the above facts stay the same. Shareholder only gets $300,000 cash. Maybe there was something going on fishy that the shareholder only gets $300,000. Don't ask why, just it can happen in business. Guess what? Corporations' tax consequences are the same. So the only thing that's going to change is the shareholder. Shareholders getting $300,000 cash. So amount realized with the breakup. 300,000 times 400 over 600, which is 2/3. Long term, right? That's going to be $200,000 goes to long term, which leaves us with $100,000 for short term, right? The remaining amount. You can also just take 200 over 600 shares and get 1/3. So it'll be 100,000 of that. So we've got the long term portion and we've got the short term portion. Amount realized minus adjusted basis. So amount realized, we just calculated $200,000 for long term, $100,000 for short term. We can roll over these bring down these bases. They're the same amounts, right? We got these from the facts. They don't change. And we subtract. Long term is going to be $150,000 long term capital gain. Short term is going to be a $1.8 million short-term capital loss. And we're done. We're done with problem 1. Any questions on problem 1? All right. So now we go to problem 2. All right, problem 2, we got U picked Fruit Corp, C Corporation. What it does doesn't matter, irrelevant. Strawberry owns 500 out of 1,000 shares of common stock. Her basis is $1 million in the stock. The corporation liquidates, and in the process, after the corporation pays all its debts, distributes $2 million cash to Strawberry. And the following assets. So in A, B, and C, it's all going to be Berryacre, but the key is that what's going to change in B and C, it's going to have different mortgage amounts on it. So in B, Berryacre has a $4 million liability that Strawberry takes. In C, Berryacre has $11 million liability that Strawberry takes. In A, there's no liability in it. Okay, so we go through our analysis. Remember this exam, first step is always ask which module. We have liquidation. If you see liquidation at all in the problem, it's going to be liquidation. Step 2, we know it's liquidation. Is it the general rule or the special rule? So we look at the owner. We only know about one owner again, Strawberry. Strawberry owned 500 out of 1,000 shares. We don't know if Strawberry is an individual or a corporation, but it's irrelevant. Why? Because it has to be a corporation that owns 80% or more of the shares of the corporation. If Strawberry even was a corporation, so being most conservative, right? Again, you need both of those requirements. Strawberry does not own 80% or more. What about the other shareholders? Can they own 80% or more? No, because Strawberry owns 50%, so 50% is left over. Everyone see that? So there's no possible way that the special rule applies. So this is going to be general rule. The general rule applies. Okay. Let's do A. So I always start with the corp. Amount realized minus adjusted basis. So let's do a little table up here. Call it table. With the greater of rule. The greater of fair market value or liability. So, for the corporation, you're taking the property being given up. What is a corporation giving up in this problem? Corporation's giving up $2 million of cash plus Berryacre. The greater of rule, the greater of fair market value of the liability, that applies only to Berryacre. That's not going to apply to cash, right? Because cash doesn't have liability on it. It's just cash. So what we're saying is in A, what's the fair market value of Berryacre? It's 10 mil. Liability, there's 0 in A. So what's the greater of those two numbers? $10 million. So we're going to put 10 million in there. Amount realized of the corp is $12 million. Minus the adjusted basis of property given up. What is Berryacre? I'm sorry, what is UPIC giving up? It's giving up cash of $2 million, which is the basis, and the basis of Berryacre, which is $3 million. That gives us a $5 million gain. Sorry, 5 million basis. $7 million gain. Character of the gain is whatever Berryacre is. Whatever is Berryacre. If it's 1231 asset, it's 1231 gain. If it's capital gain, or if it's capital asset, capital gain, right? If it's ordinary asset, if it's inventory, it's an ordinary gain. Again, I'm not going to test you on that in the exam, but you still need to know it, just the idea. So that's the corporation, an A. What about the shareholder? We do amount realized minus adjusted basis. It's going to be, okay, amount realized is what the shareholder is getting. Again, think back to Module 2, Module 1, Module 2, what the shareholder is getting. The shareholder is getting cash and Berryacre. So we add them together. Cash amount is 2 mil. Berryacre has a value of 10 mil. Amount realized is $12 million. Minus the adjusted basis of the stock plus any liabilities taken on. So remember back to Module 2, when we had all those like-kind exchanges, right? Remember when someone took on a liability, you got to add it in their basis because it's constructive cash paid. Are there any liabilities taken on in A? No. So it's just going to be the stock basis. The stock basis, we're told, and the problem is $1 million, $1 million. So the shareholder has an $11 million capital gain. We don't know if it's held long-term, short-term, probably long-term. We're just going to say $11 million capital gain. Any questions on that? Okay. B. So before we do B, it's going to be the same analysis in A and for the shareholder and the corporation, but the only thing that's changing in all these problems is that in B and C, now in B there's a $4 million liability on the property and an $11 million on the property that Strawberry, the shareholder, takes. Everything else is exactly the same. That's all that changes. 4 million liability, 11 million liability. That's all that changes. So if you think about it, that's why I created a table. In B, the fair market value is still 10 million. The liability on it that the corporation is no longer responsible for is 4. What's the greater of those two? 10. What does that mean? That means in B, for the corporation, guess what? Same as A. Same consequences as A. Because again, it's going to be 12 million amount realized, 5 million adjusted basis. Because again, the fair market value rule, the greater the fair market value, the liability. That's what you use. And the greater is the $10 million.
Quick question for the corporation amount realized. Why is the $2 million included? Because that's what they paid out $2 million. They're not receiving $2 million.
You do it. It's for all property given up. So think back to Module 8 when you had distribution. Mm-hmm. You had to calculate the basis on property going out to the shareholders. If there was any built-in gain, you were taxed on it. You're never going to be taxed on the cash because because this is always going to equal. But we still have to put it in the amount realized. I mean, I'm not going to ask you on the exam what is the amount realized, but technically speaking, like if you're putting on the tax return on the form, the amount realized would have to be reflected as what you receive, and you've given up $12 million. It wouldn't just be the 10 million fair market value of the land; it'd be 12. But you get to add in the 2 million on that to the basis, so this basically ultimately cancels out. This ultimately cancels out. All right, shareholder. So shareholder, we're doing amount realized minus adjusted basis. Again, it's what the shareholder is getting. The shareholder is getting cash and Berry Acre. Cash is 2 million. Berry Acre has a value of 10 million. So the amount realized the shareholder is 12 million. So that stays the same from A. However, the adjusted basis is the stock plus any liabilities taken on. So stock is a basis of 1 million. The liability taken on in B is $4 million. So the adjusted basis of the property given up is 5 million. This is a $7 million capital gain. Again, the stock basis is 1 million found up here. Liability taken on is right here, the $4 million. You have a $7 million capital gain. Yeah.
So the shareholder is actually taking on a liability
Yes.
from the corporation?
Yes.
Oh.
Because they're getting this property and has a liability on it.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was wondering, why do they want to do that?
Well, usually you don't want to, but if you have two owners of a business, let's say it's strawberry and blueberry. We don't care about blueberry because we're not worried about blueberry. But let's say strawberry owns 500 shares, blueberry owns 500 shares. Let's say they both join the business together. Well, the idea is that if it liquidates, they have to just break up all the assets. They go their separate ways. So the liabilities have to go somewhere. That's basically why that would happen.
Okay.
But yeah, if you can avoid liabilities, you don't want them usually. Okay, C. So let's do the corporation consequences first. So again, we go to our little table. It's the greater of the fair market value of the liability. Well, here in C, the fair market value is still 10 million. That didn't change on Berry Acre. The liability now is $11 million. The greater is $11 million. So the consequence of the corporation, amount realized minus adjusted basis, Well, again, remember it's the cash plus Berry Acre. Cash stays at $2 million. Berry Acre is $11 million. The amount realized is going to be $13 million. So it's not $12 million anymore, it's $13 million because the liability is greater. Minus the adjusted basis of the property given up, that's going to remain $5 million. Why? Because we've got $2 million cash, we've got $3 million basis in Berry Acre, stays $5 million. Same as A. That's an $8 million gain. The character is whatever Berry Acre is. Let's do this. Let's see what I can do here. So the shareholder in C, we have amount realized minus adjusted basis. So it's going to be, again, we take the cash received plus Berry Acre, fair market value. The amount realized in that time is going to be $12 million. Right, the $2 million cash plus the $10 million fair market value. The adjusted basis is the stock plus liabilities taken on. Stock is 1, liabilities taken on is 11. That's also $12 million. Guess what? Shareholder has 0 gain or loss. And we are done with problem 2. All right, problem 3. That corporation formed many years ago by Orange and Grapefruit Corp. So that's important to note is that both shareholders are corporations. Orange Corp or Orange Inc. owns 80 shares out of 100, and then the remaining 20 shares are owned by Grapefruit. So basically we have this. We've got Orange, Grapefruit. These are both supposed to be rectangles, sorry. Own Ugly Fruit. Orange owns 80%. Grapefruit owns 20% of the Ugly Fruit Corporation. So Ugly Fruit is going to liquidate. Okay, we're told that here. And here, so again, if we're going through our analysis, first question, which module? We're in module 9 because liquidation. So the second question is, do we have a shareholder that's a corporation? Yes, we do. We have two. And does one of them own 80% or more? Yes. Orange owns 80%. 80 out of 100, 80% or more. So we have the special rule. There's a general rule and the special rule in module 9. This is the special rule. So let's talk about the special rule by looking at the checklist. So again, here's our problem. So in A and B, it's exactly the same. In A, grapefruit gets a factory, and I give you the basis and the fair market value. I'm sorry, my apologies. Orange gets a factory. I give you the adjusted basis and fair market value. Grapefruit gets some stock, and I give you the adjusted basis and fair market value. Now, the only thing that changes in A to B is that the bases and the fair market values of the assets, they change. That's it. These numbers. They change. That's the only thing that changes. Okay? So again, we have to do this in looking at the three different owners. We've got the parent, which is orange. That's what we usually start with. That's easiest. We've got the minority shareholder, grapefruit, and then we got the subsidiary. And we do that one last. Let's go ahead and do this. So what I like to do is I like to break it up like this. Let's start with the parent, orange. So orange is the parent. Orange is the easiest of the three. Whenever you have a parent corporation in a liquidation, no gain or loss recognized. Same as A for that part. The adjusted basis equals carryover. So that means in A it's going to be $9 million. So orange is getting a factory from ugly fruit. The basis that orange takes is $9 million. Okay? The adjusted basis of the factory in B is going to be whatever it is, $30 million. We've just done the consequences to orange. Easy. See how easy that was? No gain or loss recognized. You roll over the basis. Easy. Let's do grapefruit. Grapefruit, we do the amount realized minus adjusted basis, just like we did under the general rule. There's no liabilities in this problem, so it's easy. So you're taking what grapefruit's getting. What is grapefruit getting? Grapefruit is getting tangerine stock. In A, the fair market value of the tangerine stock is $5 million. The adjusted basis is going to be in ugly fruit stock, which we're told grapefruit has a basis of $2 million. $3 million capital gain. We don't know how long grapefruit is held. Oh, wait. Does it say more than 5 years? No, it doesn't. It's a capital gain. We can't tell if it's long-term or short-term. Most likely going to be long-term capital gain, it looks like. Guess what? In B, it's the same result. Because the fair market value of the tangerine stock and, of course, the adjusted basis and the ugly fruit stock are the same. So we've just done grapefruit. Easy, right? So now we do the most difficult, which is ugly. Ugly fruit. The subsidiary. So again, the rule is we basically apply the general rule between what happened with respect to ugly fruit and grapefruit, but we ignore what happened with respect to orange and ugly fruit. So I drew out that line. We ignore what happened between ugly fruit and orange, but we only focus on what happened between ugly fruit and grapefruit. So that means you're asking what property is being given up to grapefruit. And that is going to be the fair market value of the tangerine stock, which equals in A, 5 million. And the adjusted basis is going to be the adjusted basis in the tangerine stock, which in A is 4 million. So ugly fruit has a $1 million gain, depending on what the character of the asset tangerine stock is. It's probably capital, so it's probably capital gain, right? In B, we do amount realized minus adjusted basis. So again, it's the fair market value. It's the same things here. So the fair market value of the tangerine stock in B is also $5 million. The adjusted basis is $6 million. We've got a $1 million loss. But remember, the rule said, special rule, if the subsidiary has a loss, you can't take it. So the idea is that you can never have, the subsidiary can only have a gain but never a loss in this special rule. So what does it do? It makes this loss equal to 0. The loss is lost forever, and we're done with this problem. And we're done with Module 9. Any questions?